Alone in space, astronaut Molly Woods returns home to a warm reunion with her husband John and their son Ethan. However, Molly starts experiencing unsettling symptoms, persistent nausea and vomiting. At the welcoming party, Ethan got in trouble after hitting another boy. John told him that he should not do this again as he took him to his bed, and while they talk, Ethan told John that he needs a rest. John calmly opened a small compartment on Ethan's back and adjusted a device that resembles a battery. Ethan isn't a biological child. He is a humanac, a highly advanced robotic creation developed by John to fill the void left by the couple's struggles with infertility. Molly went to the doctor, who was in awe after receiving her results. The doctor kept asking if there was anyone else in the spaceship, but Molly reminded her the mission was solo. The doctor then revealed that Molly was pregnant, and in a flashback to her space mission, Molly is seen conversing with Ben, the AI system managing her spacecraft. But the routine moment takes an unsettling turn when she encounters a vision of Marcus Dawkins, her long-deceased ex-boyfriend and fellow astronaut. During this encounter, Ben temporarily malfunctions, creating a blackout in the system. Meanwhile, John focuses on securing funding for his Humanac projects, showcasing Ethan as a prototype to potential investors. Scientists are initially skeptical and uneasy about robots that could evolve beyond human control. Molly was reporting about the power outage during her mission. She offers a plausible explanation to her superiors, claiming a solar flare caused Ben's failure and erased 13 hours of footage. But despite her compelling story, her superiors didn't believe her. John went to see Hideki Yasumoto, the head of a powerful organization, because he was denied funding after his previous presentation. Mr. Yasumoto told him that he can't force his shareholders to fund his project, but he can fund it as an individual. Molly and Ethan went out for ice cream, but suddenly Molly received a balloon that was paid for, and she wanted to get away from that place. Ethan didn't want to go, and he ran to the woods, and when she followed through, she saw him standing by a dead bird and looked at her in a strange way. In another flashback, Molly went to where Marcus was standing, and he started touching her, and she realized that he was real. They got close to kissing, and after a while, when she woke up, she saw the camera footage and realized that Marcus wasn't there. She then deliberately erased the recordings after witnessing herself in the capsule, appearing to embrace nothing but empty air. Later, as Molly unwinds after a long day, she has an unexpected encounter while taking out the trash. Harmon Krieger, a fellow astronaut who was presumed dead by unaliving himself after his traumatic return to Earth, appears before her. He insists that he's very much alive and warns Molly not to trust people around her. Meanwhile, back at home, Molly attempts to connect with Ethan by playing games, and downstairs, she experienced intense stomach pain and saw Marcus in the house. She's then discovered on the floor by Ethan. Molly attempts to review footage from Harmon's mission, hoping to uncover clues about their shared experiences. However, the spacecraft's computer Ben blocks her access, and Molly removes a microchip from her mouth. She then sneaks away and meets with Harmon, and Molly confides with Harmon and reveals the fact that their medical results show identical abnormalities. She speculates that their shared visions during their mission are connected, and Harmon exclaims that they weren't just part of an experiment, they were the experiment. After this, Molly goes to see Sam for an ultrasound, and they saw the baby, which is 14 weeks old and completely healthy. Determined to get answers, Molly confronts Sparks directly, demanding to know why she returned from a solo mission, inexplicably pregnant. Sparks deflects, insisting that the ISEA wouldn't deceive her, and Sparks told Mr. Yasumoto about Molly, which made Mr. Yasumoto happy. Sparks receives the results of Molly's ultrasound from his colleague. Molly keeps her pregnancy hidden from John, and he was organizing a birthday party for Molly. Later, Molly encounters Sparks, who drops a bombshell and admits that the ISEA secretly used genetic material from both her and John during experimental testing, resulting in her pregnancy. Sparks urges Molly to come to the lab for further testing, warning her that her brain activity matches that of Harmon Krieger, who had vivid hallucinations before he unalived himself. While playing outside, he traps a bird in a trap of his own design, watching and listening as it struggles to escape. On Ethan's first day, other parents voice concerns about sending their children to school alongside a human-act. Molly defends Ethan, reassuring them that he isn't a threat, just a little different. Julie, John's colleague, was worried about Ethan's first day and confided in Charlie about it, but he told her he'll be fine. Molly visits Harmon's secret hideout, and although Harmon wasn't there, Molly discovers a strange pattern of interlocking circles drawn on the wall. During the celebration of Molly's birthday party, Sam discreetly collects a blood sample to run tests in the lab. She saw the patterns from Harmon's house on where her blood was taken from, and suddenly there was a power outage, and John went to turn on the generator, and John discovers Ethan's contraption holding the captured bird. Frustrated, he tells Ethan that the family can't have secrets, and Ethan revealed that Molly has a secret. John confronted her and left her with no choice, and Molly admits to John that she's pregnant, insisting that the child is theirs. John believed her and attempted to calm her down, and later, Molly looked for Tim to say bye, but Tim's appearance wasn't real. Like her vision of Marcus, it was another hallucination. Deciding she needs answers, Molly agrees to Spark's suggestion and allows him to drive her to the lab for testing. However, mid-journey, she receives an urgent text from Sam, warning her to escape immediately. Sam reveals that Sparks wasn't trustworthy and is holding crucial information. Acting on instinct, Molly leaps out of the car only to find John waiting nearby, ready to rescue her. Molly takes her family to a scheduled northern island to seek refuge with her estranged father. Back at the ICEA, Sam finds herself detained after her warning to Molly is discovered. She even goes further by draining Molly's blood sample in the toilet. Quinn took Ethan for supper. On the way home, Sparks went out of the car to urinate, and Ethan got abducted. His abductors then shut him off. Molly and John race to find Ethan, but a police officer refuses to prioritize the search for a robot child, leading to a heated confrontation. Ethan punches the police officer, and Molly eventually discovers Ethan lying lifeless on the ground, his systems powered off. Before she can react, a light envelops her, and she is suddenly taken away. John's actions got him arrested, and he sat in his cell, desperate for news and hoping Molly had found Ethan. Meanwhile, Molly wakes to find herself aboard the unknown ship, restrained on an operating table. Even though she managed to escape initially, masked figures surround her, and she is then sedated, and the operation begins with an incision in her stomach. Sparks has broken into Molly's childhood home and was on the verge of discovering the DNA test results. Meanwhile, the search for Molly and Ethan intensifies as John and the police scour the area. Eventually, John stumbles upon Molly unconscious in a field, with Ethan lying lifeless beside her. Julie, after an intimate moment with the man, went to take a shower, and it's revealed she has robotic legs. When Molly regained consciousness, the doctor told her that there was no pregnancy at all, and physically she's healthy, but her condition doesn't align with her prior belief that she was expecting. John and Molly joined Julie and Charlie in a lab, and while talking outside, John suggested that Molly might have been hallucinating about the pregnancy, which left her frustrated. In the lab, John reactivates Ethan despite Julie's resistance, and Ethan stirs to life, but he doesn't recognize his father, asking, "Who are you?" And this is before Julie powers him down again. Molly visits Sparks and feigns acceptance of the official narrative. She pretends to believe her pregnancy was merely a hallucination, expressing a desire to return to work. Sparks agrees, but he kept tracking her through the security camera, and Ethan reactivates on his own, and this time, Ethan remembers both John and Molly, seemingly returning to his usual self. Molly receives a file from her lab assistant Danny containing critical footage from her space mission, and using a new algorithm Danny discovered, Molly reviews the moment when she had the vision of Marcus. The data reveals an unexplained presence in the capsule at the time, and it was unclear what it was, but something undeniably accompanied her in space. Meanwhile, Sparks visits a hidden chamber where Molly's baby was being kept alive in secret. Gazing at the child, Sparks asks what it was, and a scientist responds simply, "It's a boy." Ethan awakens in a panic, drenched in sweat, haunted by a vivid nightmare. but as a humanac, he was not programmed to have nightmares. In the ICSE lab, the scientists monitored the baby closely, but something strange was happening. After visiting the baby, one of the scientists becomes disoriented and the mysterious circular pattern seen on Molly's stomach and Krieger's trailer wall appears on his head. Soon Sparks was called in because the scientist's behavior turns violent, culminating in a deadly rampage where he kills a colleague. Molly went back to Sam and asked for a checkup, and she pretended to apologize and stick a device in Sam's hand. Sparks saw this interaction and went to Sam to confront her, and Molly heard everything through the device she put on Sam. Gordon visits an oxygen bar to relax, but while unconscious under the oxygen mask, Harmon steals his fingerprints. These stolen prints were soon used to infiltrate the ICEA, and Sparks reprimanded Gordon because Harmon stole files after getting inside with Gordon's fingerprints. Back at home, Molly observes Ethan angrily sketching his nightmare, and this image is familiar. The same circular pattern that has haunted her since her pregnancy. Molly called Sam and told her information about Harmon's whereabouts to divert their attention, and in the lab, a man Juliet met in a gym, Odin showed up to get a fix of his robotic hands. While there, she told him that she designed Ethan's body. Molly and John secretly met with Harmon, who provides them with a memory stick containing encrypted data from his mission. Harmon admits that he hadn't been able to crack the code and hopes John might have better luck. After the meeting, Gordon managed to track down Harmon and attacked him from behind, and in the lab, John struggles to decode it, but within seconds, Ethan solved the puzzle effortlessly. The decrypted video reveals shocking footage of Commander Sparks' daughter Katie, a former astronaut who perished on her mission, and in the recording, Katie addresses the camera with desperation, speaking about the same circular pattern, and it becomes clear that she too was infected. The circles emerge from her stomach just as they did with Molly, and Katie was also pregnant during her mission. The realization dawns on Molly as she wasn't the target of a random anomaly. She was a carefully chosen piece in a much larger scheme orchestrated by Sparks himself, and if her child was so vital to his plans, Molly knows the baby is still alive. In yet another secret ICSE chamber, Sparks greets the vision of a young girl, and it's his deceased daughter Katie, somehow preserved or recreated. In a flashback, Sparks notified the group of scientists about a distress call that they received from a spaceship, and they believe that there were no survivors. Among the scientists were Katie. Fueled by anger and a desire for answers, Molly showed Sam the video she found. She wanted to confront Sparks and make him pay for using her as part of his twisted experiment. She asked Sam for help in getting a fire that can help them in anything, and Gordon interrogates Harmon, who was tied up and accused of tampering with the Aruna file, but Harmon refused to tell him anything. At school, Ethan begins exhibiting extraordinary new abilities since his revival, and most notably, he can now speak and understand Japanese, a language he's never been programmed to know. John is deeply unsettled, realizing that Ethan's sudden advancements are beyond his control. Molly managed to track down the apartment of a colleague, but when she reached there, he had jumped off a building. Ignoring John's warnings about the dangers Sparks poses, Molly takes matters into her own hands. She confronts Sparks directly, demanding answers about the Aruna mission and Katie's death. She calls him out for his cold calculations, accusing him of sending his own daughter to her doom. Molly's fury was palpable as she warns him to pray for Katie's forgiveness and to pray that Molly doesn't cross his path again. She makes it clear that nothing will stop her from finding her stolen baby. Odin was in a group meeting making a speech about how they lost their humanity to machines. He then showed the group the picture of Ethan and told them that they needed him, and suddenly Yasumoto's wife got in, apologizing for being late. Later, Molly breaks into an office building of the dead colleague, hoping to uncover evidence, and instead, she's ambushed by a masked figure. Initially terrified, she soon discovers the man is Gordon, and he's been there to help her. With Gordon's assistance, Molly escapes the trap and is whisked away in a car driven by Harmon. Meanwhile, John decides to intervene in Ethan's rapid development by modifying his programming, convinced it's the safest way to ensure Ethan remains under control. However, when John attempts to access Ethan's system, he discovers he's been locked out entirely. Gordon told Molly everything that the ISEA did to her. Her baby was alive, kept in isolation, and continuing to grow. But Molly wasn't truly the child's mother. Instead, she was merely a host selected by Sparks to bring the entity to Earth. John came as she was with Gordon and Harmon, and John didn't like the idea of Molly being associated with them, but that was the only way. Meanwhile, Sparks informs Yasumoto of Molly's intrusion into their operations and subsequent escape, and Sparks argues that Molly was too dangerous and must be eliminated, but Yasumoto refuses. Molly was still vital to the offspring and may be necessary for its survival, even at a distance. Yasumoto, revealing that he's dying, explains that the substance, a life-renewing force linked to the offspring, is the only thing keeping him alive. They agree to move the offspring to a more secure location, which is a contingency site, until they're certain it can survive without Molly. Ethan went out alone and encountered bullies who attempted to take his bike, and they push him into a ditch, and his skin peels off, scaring off the bullies. Gordon finds out that the team was going to move the offspring and notified Molly and Harmon, and he was also given an order to kill Molly before they moved it. The three of them then decided to head to the lab despite Harmon's reluctance. Molly sent a message for John and told him her plan, and John decided to go after her and called Julie to look after Ethan, who was with Odin at the time, so she brought him along. Molly and Harmon got inside after the distraction Gordon caused, but Sparks quickly catches on and realizes Gordon had been playing both sides. Suddenly, people in the lab started shooting each other after showing those circular symbols, and Molly and Harmon got inside the incubator and Harmon shot it, shocking Molly. But when Molly rushes in, she finds not her child, but a doctor, fatally shot by Harmon. The offspring had already been moved and she was too late, and Sparks and Molly finally come face to face. Sparks confesses his motivations, revealing that the offspring possesses a life-renewing substance that could bring his deceased daughter Katie back in some form. He insists that he didn't want things to end this way, but his desperation consumed him, and Sparks shoots Molly, and he then turns her over, ready to ensure her death, and he's stunned to see not Molly, but the vision of his dead daughter Katie staring back at him. The offspring was now on the loose, leaving a trail of destruction in its wake. Molly, reeling from the events of the Claypool Industries, is more determined than ever to find it. The facility was littered with the bodies of the ISEA operations, and meanwhile at John's lab, Julie's boyfriend Odin grows closer to Ethan, who was eager for companionship. John went to see Yasumoto and asked for help in finding Molly, and Yasumoto reassured him, telling him to leave everything to him. Sparks resigned from his job and retreats to an old family campground where he was haunted by visions of his deceased daughter Katie. Sometimes he sees her as a young girl that he once knew, and other times as the astronaut that she became. Sparks, now in possession of the offspring, clings to the hope that it holds the key to bringing Katie back to life. Back at the house, Ethan allows Odin to flip him, granting access to his internal power source to replace his energy module. The fallout from the Claypool has splintered Molly's team, and Harmon, convinced that the offspring is a grave danger, insists it must be destroyed before it causes more harm. Gordon, torn between his loyalty to Molly and his suspicion about Sparks, resolved to support her mission. Julie, Ethan, and Odin went to Yasumoto's house to join them there, and Odin and Ethan kept bonding in the lab, playing and talking. Sparks is going crazy, still under the influence of the baby, and has killed a woman and abducted a police officer. Katie, as a little girl, is always with him. Molly manages to escape Claypool, taking a captured operative with her. When his phone rings, she answers, only to hear Yasumoto on the other end, and surprisingly, Yasumoto proposes an alliance. He insists that they share a common goal, ensuring the offspring survives. Though skeptical, Molly listens as Yasumoto introduces her to Dr. Mason, an expert in extraterrestrial life who could help her locate her baby. Reluctantly, Molly agrees to work with them, feeling that she has no other choice, and Dr. Mason's first move was to destroy Molly's phone, revealing it as a tracking device that could lead their enemy straight to them. With no way to call for help, Molly sets off with Dr. Mason on a precarious journey to find the offspring, as Mr. Yasumoto has orchestrated a game, gaining control over both Molly and John, and while Molly was off with Dr. Mason in pursuit of her baby, John and Ethan were effectively confined under Yasumoto's watchful eye. As Molly travels with Dr. Mason, he promises her that they will recover her baby on her terms, and Mason explains that the answers humanity seeks aren't out in the cosmos anymore, and extraterrestrial life is coming to them. Yet Molly remains haunted by her past, and when they pass a police car, she has a vivid vision of a car accident with her late ex-boyfriend Marcus lying lifeless by the side. She remembers being pregnant with Marcus's child, a pregnancy that ended too soon, leaving her devastated. Meanwhile, at a remote campsite, Sparks brings his ex-wife Anya to witness what he believes to be a miracle, an apparent resurrection of their daughter Katie. Anya was skeptical until she sees Katie herself appearing as a young girl. Gordon and Harmon, intent on finding Molly, encounter resistance. A sheriff who was abducted by Sparks is under the influence of the baby and approached and asked them to get in the car with him, and suddenly he turns violent, attempting to shoot them, but they manage to escape into the woods. As Molly and Dr. Mason continue their journey, they're attacked by a flock of birds, which Molly interprets as a warning. Her instincts tell her not to trust Mason or Yasumoto, and acting on her fears, she manages to contact John and warns him of her suspicions. Back at the campground, the offspring's survival comes at a cost, and Katie kept asking Sparks to give it something to feed on, and the offspring fed on people, draining their life force without killing them outright. Sparks captures a mechanic offering him sustenance for the offspring, but those who survive were altered, hollow, and robotic. Molly eventually arrives at the campground, where Sparks taunts her with the promise of seeing her baby. In that moment, Molly experiences a vision of the child she and Marcus might have had if the accident hadn't taken its toll. Entranced by the vision, Molly falls into a daze, leaving her vulnerable to Sparks' manipulations. At Yasumoto's house, John devises a plan to escape with Ethan, and he instructs Ethan to lower his body temperature to bypass Yasumoto's sensors and access the downstairs lab. Once inside, Ethan was to signal Julie to restore his normal functions, and Ethan makes it to the lab, but his plans are interrupted when he encounters Odin, who convinces Ethan to leave with him. Back at the campsite, Spark coerces Molly into entering a code into the computer, using her as a tool to sustain the offspring. Before Sparks can harm Molly further, Gordon and Harmon arrive, initiating a shootout, and Sparks fatally shoots Harmon and drives off. Yasumoto was running out of time, with just 8 days left to capture the offspring or succumb to his mortality. His desperation intensifies. Meanwhile, Molly and Gordon continue their frantic search for the offspring. Elsewhere, Odin continues manipulating Ethan, planting seeds of doubt about his family. He tells Ethan his parents didn't see him as truly part of the family, and warns that they plan to shut him down. Vulnerable and unsure, Ethan accepts a special emergency phone from Odin, and suddenly the ISEA loses contact with the Seraphim, and the spacecraft, now hurtling toward Earth, has gone off course. Molly then realizes that she was sending codes to the Seraphim, but she doesn't remember what she did. In her search for answers, Molly enlists her friend Sam to inject a memory enhancer into her neck, hoping to unlock suppressed memories. Slowly, the pieces fall into place, and Molly realizes the codes she entered during her vision aboard the Seraphim were not sabotage, and they were actually a warning. But the situation has spiraled beyond control, and the Seraphim is now on a collision course with Earth. If it enters the atmosphere, it will disintegrate, killing everyone aboard, including Sparks' daughter, Katie. Back at the lab, Julie and Charlie attempted to do tests on Ethan, but he started getting paranoid, and Ethan resists, and Julie calms him down, telling him that they love him, and that they would never shut him down. After seeing Ethan calm, Julie asked why he thought that they would shut him off, and he mentioned that Odin told him. Molly told John that she declined the mission to go back to Seraphim, but he associated it with the changes that have happened to her and stormed out. She followed him and they reconciled, and as John was talking to Molly, Ethan walked in and saw John talking to himself. John was infected by the offspring, and the circular pattern that has plagued others now appears on his neck. The real Molly was in the kitchen, where she was stunned by the arrival of a young boy at her door. It is her first encounter with the offspring, now appearing as a child. Ethan arrived and broke the glass to the door, scaring the child away. Julie sneaks into Odin's apartment and uncovers the truth. Odin is working against the human axe, and taking control of Ethan was the only first step in his larger plan. Racing against time, she rushes to warn John and Molly, but it was too late, and Ethan and Molly were gone. Molly follows the child outside, trying to understand why it was hiding. The boy confesses that he's afraid of those without blood, and Molly begs him to stop these extraterrestrial beings from coming to Earth, but it was already too late, and the invasion has already begun. To stop the invaders, Molly realizes that she must return to space for one final mission. The fate of Earth rests on her shoulders, and Molly embarks on her final mission to save Earth by intercepting the Deciphering before it reaches the planet. Armed with a special helmet designed to distinguish reality from hallucination, she prepares for the dangerous task ahead. On the Deciphering, Molly found the shaken Sean, and he explained that they need to leave as soon as possible because of the changes he was seeing in Katie. Meanwhile, back on Earth, John faces a moral dilemma. Odin's tampering has made Ethan a potential threat, but John had promised Ethan that he would never shut him down. John, along with Julie and Charlie, tried to convince Ethan that they need to shut him down in order to see what Odin did to him, and Ethan, who was manipulated by Odin, assumed that they were trying to shut him off together, so he took out the phone Odin gave him and threatened to call him, but the phone was actually not a phone, and it was a controller for the device that he put inside of Ethan, which is an explosive, and after a lot of compelling, Ethan gave John the controller. On the Seraphim, Molly encountered Katie, or rather, the vision of her, and Molly quickly realized that Katie was not the kind, loving daughter that Sparks remembers, but a malevolent force bent on harm. The false Katie outmaneuvers Molly, trapping her in a restricted area of the ship, and at the same time, Sean hears a voice telling him that the Molly he sees isn't real, and confused, Sean struggles to determine who to trust. Back at the ISEA, chaos erupts as the offspring infiltrates the building. With every encounter, it infects and controls the minds of those it meets, leaving the ISEA on high alert and forcing a lockdown to contain the threat. On the Seraphim, Molly's infection becomes evident as the growing circular pattern appears on her hand. Realizing she cannot save herself, she removes her helmet and sacrifices her safety to steal Sean in a protective capsule, ensuring his survival. At the lab, John shuts Ethan down just to understand what Odin had done, and once Ethan was powered down, they discover a bomb in a place of Ethan's battery, an unstable device that could detonate at any moment. The team is left grappling with an impossible choice: sacrifice Ethan to save everyone else, or risk the bomb going off while trying to disarm it. As they deliberate, the offspring's rampage at the ISEA continues. Ethan, realizing he may be the only one capable of stopping the offspring, volunteers to confront it. As a humanac, he cannot be infected or controlled. Reluctantly, John sends Ethan into danger, knowing there's no other option. On the Seraphim, Ben and the onboard AI refuse to let Molly return to Earth due to her infection, but Ethan, working from the ISEA, overrides Ben's control, and Molly protests, knowing that the override requires a human-level body temperature, a change that could destroy Ethan. Undeterred, Ethan raises his temperature, risking overheating to bring his mother and the Seraphim safely back to Earth. As Seraphim approaches, the offspring faces Ethan at the ISEA, and Ethan warns him to flee, and the offspring runs, escaping into the world, while Ethan was overheating from his sacrifice and triggers the bomb. The explosion ends the immediate threat, but costs Ethan his life. 5 days later, Molly mourns the loss of Ethan, but strange things begin happening. John and Molly hear Ethan's voice, sensing his presence everywhere, and though Ethan's body was gone, it seems as though his spirit lives on. Elsewhere on a quiet road, a couple spots the offspring, appearing as a lost boy walking alone. They stop to offer him a ride, unaware of what they're inviting into their lives, and they all got in the car and drove off.